And this is what we will need to make our elegant pumpkins. I have here page 2 of the directions, and it's got all the fabric and hoop shape and tearaway listed that we will need. I'm going to make the small pumpkin for this video, so I'm going to do 2 leaves. So I have 2 pieces of fabric for each leaf, and they are 3.5 inches square. I'm going to put one on the right side of the leaf and one on the other side, just to give it a little variety. I have 6 pieces of fabric for the actual pumpkin shape, and you can refer to your directions for the size. I have a hoop, all hooped up with tearaway stabilizer. And next I need to prepare my hoop shape. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out 6 of the small pumpkin shapes. This is actually for the pumpkin or the acorn. You'll cut 6 of them. And then I'm going to cut out 2 of my small leaf shapes. So on this page, we've got the small and the large leaf shape for the pumpkin, and we have the small and the large leaf shape for the oak leaf for the acorn. So let's move on to the hoop shape. So to get my hoop shape ready, I got myself out a paper scissors, and I cut out my small leaf shape, and I cut out my pumpkin shape for the size I'm doing. And for the leaf, I actually traced it using, I actually used a Frixion pen. You can use really any kind of pen that won't show through your fabric. And so I will cut these out with a nice sharp scissors. For my pumpkin shape, I find it easier and faster to take a little bit of glue pen or glue stick, put a little bit on the back of the pattern, stick it to my hoop shape. And my favorite tool is this small 28mm rotary cutter. And if you have a nice sharp blade, you can just run that cutter right along the edge of your template. I try really hard not to cut the template. If you have a nice small cutter like this, you can get right along the edge. So once you get that cut, take this off, put it on the next piece of hoop shape, and cut all 6 of them out. So my hoop shape is cut and ready to go, and I did mark with an X the right side of my leaf patterns, because if you reverse them, of course, they're not going to fit very well. The pumpkin shapes are fine. You don't need to know top and bottom because they're the same. So now we're ready to get stitching. So for threads, we are going to need some embroidery thread. I'm going to stitch the feather pumpkin, so I chose this thread for my feathers. Some pre-wound bobbins or just regular bobbin thread, and also my almost gone spool of wash away thread. So those are the 3 threads we will use for this project. We're going to start in the needle with the wash away thread, and we will leave the embroidery bobbin thread in the machine throughout the whole process. So here are my pumpkin shapes stitched out on my tearaway. In this particular hoop, I was able to fit 4, so you could do that if you have a larger hoop. It saves on stabilizer. So I'll do 4 in this hoop, and I'll do 2 in another hoop, and I'll have all 6 that I need. We ask that you do yours in a wash away thread. I did a gray thread so it could be seen on camera. So the first step is your wash away thread, stitching out the placement stitch for your hoop shape. And then after that, I love to use a little bit of glue stick. putting it in the middle of where I need the shape to go, and then placing my hoop shape within that placement stitch. So I'll just do that on all of these. And then I'll place it back under the machine. I will keep the wash away thread on, and I will, the machine will zigzag down these hoop shape pieces. So we'll come back when that's finished. So here are my 4 hoop shapes tacked down onto my tearaway stabilizer. And I did switch to the wash away thread because I don't want any color showing through my fabric. I have a light color fabric. So if I'd have left that gray in there, it would have shown through. So the next step is to take my pieces of fabric that I'm using for my pumpkin. And what I like to do is fold it in half with the right sides together, just to get it centered. And then place it over the pumpkin shape, keeping about the same amount of fabric at this end as I have at this end, lining up the fold with the center, and then open it up. And then I know I have it covered nicely. The machine is just going to tack this down, and because I'm doing 4 in 1 hoop, my machine will go from this one to this one to this one to this one. So I'm just going to manually stop it after it tacks this one down, and I will trim away a little bit right here. I'll show you that when I come to it. Then I'll place this fabric. So I don't want to place all 4 at once because they'll overlap each other. So let's stitch this one down. So I stopped my machine from going to stitch this one, and down here in the corner, I'm just going to trim away a little bit of my fabric so it doesn't overlap this piece. And then I'll take my next piece of fabric and do the same thing. Fold it right sides together and just align it with the center point of the pumpkin shape. This technique is great if you have a fabric with like a design in it that you need it to go straight. A couple of my pumpkins had that, so that works out perfectly. And I am continuing to use the water-soluble thread. I'm going to bring my hoop forward, trim away just a little bit of my fabric so there's no overlapping again. And I'll keep going. I'll do the last 2 hoop shape pieces for the pumpkin. Here are all 4 of my pumpkin shapes basted down with the fabric and the water-soluble thread. And I did trim away any fabric that would overlap the stitching area of the next pumpkin. And the last step is to put in my embroidery thread, and it will stitch the beautiful feather shape inside the pumpkin pieces. Here's my 4 pumpkin shapes, completely stitched. I'm just going to cut them apart so I can trim them. So once I cut them apart, I just freehand cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the outside basting stitch. Doesn't have to be exact. If you're more comfortable measuring, go for it, but it doesn't really have to be perfect. It just has to be trimmed away. Leave about a 1/4 inch. So as you can see, it's not perfectly a 1/4 inch, but it's close enough. So I'll do that to all 6 of my pieces, and then we can stitch them together. Before we get to stitching our pumpkin sections together, we have to mark on the wrong side of the top of each pumpkin section, so we know where to begin and end our stitching. So we'll flip it over, and this is the very top of my stitching on my pumpkin section. I'm going to make a mark about a 1/4 inch down on each side. And this is where I'm going to begin and end, or begin my stitching. So do that on the top of each of your pumpkin pieces. For the first 2 sections we're stitching together, we're going to leave an opening to turn the pumpkin later. So I'm going to stitch from this 1/4 inch mark to this mark here, and then I'm going to stitch about 1 inch up from the bottom all the way to the point. So I will put these 2 pieces right sides together, and the first thing I'm going to mark is, or pin, I'm going to put a pin right at the point at the bottom through to the other pumpkin piece. And I'll do the same at the top, right at the point, through to the other piece. And I'll just give them a pinch. This is just like we do the blocks, like put a pin in and pinch it, and then I take another pin and I put it in, and then I can take out the one at the point. Same thing down here. I'll pinch it, put a pin in, take out the one at the point, and then I will put a pin right there where I decided to stop stitching. That's right in the basting line there. Pass it through to the other piece right in the basting line, pinch it, and pin it. And I'm going to be stitching this section, so I'll put one more pin in there, right on the basting line, through to both sections, pinch it, and pin it. And I'm going to also put one last one right at that inch mark, right on the basting line, through to the second one, pinch it, and pin it. So this is my first section that I'm going to stitch. Again, starting at that 1/4 inch mark, back tacking. Make sure you back tack a lot. There's going to be stress here. Stitch right along the basting stitch to this mark, another back tack, because again there'll be stress. Leave this open for turning, and back start again right there at that 1/4, or that mark right there. It's about 1 inch up from the bottom. Back tack, stitch along the basting line just to the point. Don't go past it, and back tack right there. So the other pieces we will put right sides together. We're going to do this in 3 sections of 2. Again, I'm going to pin through the point, at one end, do the same at the opposite end. Give them a pinch so I know they're in the right place. Replace it with a pin, take out the matching one, pinch this one, take out the matching one, And then we'll just put a few along the side. So right through the basting line, pass it through to the other piece. Put one more up here. So this piece, we're going to start at that 1/4 inch mark that we made earlier. Tons of back stitching right along the basting stitch, all the way to the point at the bottom, back stitch. And I will do this for these last two sections as well. So we'll get these right sides together, get them pinned on one side, and stitch them exactly like this one is. So here are my three sections stitched together. This is the one with the opening for turning. So now we're going to put those together. So I'm going to turn one right side out. And looking for my blue marks, or my marks I made a 1/4 inch down, I'll match it up with the same end with the same marks. And I like to start at the bottom, putting a pin in through the point, matching with that point, pinching, putting a pin in, taking out the match pin. And I'll do the same at the point at the top. I do the point, not the 1/4 inch mark, because I kind of eyeballed the 1/4 inch mark. So by pinning the point, I can just start at the 1/4 inch mark. So I'll put a pin through both points, pinch it really tight, take another pin, put it in, and then the middle. So pretty much like you're doing two together, only we're doing two sections of two. So this one is all pinned, so I will take it to the machine and I'll start at that 1/4 inch mark, do lots of back stitching because of the stress up here, stitch all along the basting line, all the way to the end, and do back stitching right there. So here I have my 4 sections sewn together, time to add the last 2. So I'll take this other section and turn it right side out, making sure I have all of my blue 1/4 inch marks facing the same way. So here's my blue 1/4 inch and here's my blue 1/4 inch. I'll put the small one inside the big one. Match up my ends, just like we've been doing. And I will pin this seam and stitch the whole thing from the very top to the very bottom. Making sure I only match the ends, not the 1/4 inch marks, because they were just sort of eyeballed. So we'll get this pinned and we'll come pinned and stitch, and we'll go ahead and stitch the very last seam. So here we have our inside out little pumpkin, and it's ready to turn. So because we made that opening first, we can go ahead and turn it through there. And this opening up here at the top, I can get my finger inside of it, is going to be for our cinnamon stick stems. So just take your time and turn it right side out. Hopefully you did a lot of back stitching at all of your beginning and ending points, and also at the opening edge, because there's a little stress when you do this. take your time. Push it all through. There we go. And now our beautiful feather pumpkin is ready to stuff. So we have our opening here to stuff it. This is our opening for the stem. And we'll just take some polyfill and stuff it. So now that our little pumpkin shape is done, it's time to do the leaves to go onto the top. So for the leaves, you will need some water-soluble thread in your hoop, or I'm sorry, water-soluble stabilizer in your hoop, which I've got here. You will need 2 pieces of fabric for each leaf. So I'm going to put a different piece of color of fabric on each side of my leaf. So one will go on the front, one will go on the back. And I have 4 because I'm doing 2 leaves. You will need your hoop shape pieces that we'd already cut out. And you'll need an embroidery bobbin thread. You'll need an embroidery thread. And then the embroidery thread filled onto a bobbin for when we get to the satin stitch part of the leaf. So the first step in doing the leaves is it'll stitch a placement stitch on top of your water-soluble stabilizer. You should do it in water-soluble thread. I did it in gray so you could see it on the camera, so hopefully this is visible. And then we'll take our 2 leaf shapes that we cut out of hoop shape, and I'll put a little bit of glue here. And I did mark which side was the top of my leaf so it would fit easily with the little X. And we just place that inside your placement stitch. And continuing with the water-soluble thread, we will go ahead and zigzag down these leaf shapes. So now that my leaves are tacked down, I'm going to take the hoop off the machine, carefully turn it over, and I will place 2 pieces of fabric on the back of the leaves. So I'll do this one here, a little bit of glue. I think I'll do the other fabric here. I can feel that it's completely covering. And then I'll turn it back over again carefully. And I will do fabric here and here. And keeping with the water-soluble thread, I'll put it back on the machine and it will outline this 2 times, and then we'll trim it like an applique. So I've got my hoop off the machine, and if you happen to have a turntable, this is a old rotary cutter turntable I keep around. These are great for trimming appliques while they're still in the hoop, because you can move your hoop without actually moving your hoop. So there's less chance of the things in your hoop getting out of whack. So the first thing I like to do is turn it over and trim the back side. So I've got my little mini hoop scissors, and we're going to trim this really nice and close because this is going to do a satin stitch. Let's see, I can turn my hoop without actually moving the hoop because it's a turntable that's moving. So I'll just go all the way around and take my time. Trim really close. So there's the back of one, and I'll just keep going and do the back of the second one. So now the back of my fabric is trimmed on the back side of the hoop. We'll turn it over and we'll repeat for the front side. Okay, so there's my 2 leaves ready for the last step. For the last step, I'm going to switch out my bobbin thread to the embroidery bobbin thread that matches my needle bobbin thread, or my needle thread. So this is regular embroidery thread. I'll switch these two threads out, and then the machine will stitch a satin stitch around the entire leaf, and I'll also do some decorative stitching in the center. Okay, my 2 little leaves are completely done. They're still sitting in my hoop with my water-soluble stabilizer. And I'm just going to take the small rotary cutter and get around them. Don't cut the thread. Don't worry about getting too close. It is water-soluble, so I'll cut it out like this. And I will take them to a sink, and I'll run a little basin of water, and I'll let them soak for a few minutes, and then we'll let them dry. So here are my 2 leaves after I've soaked them and I let them dry, and I kind of formed a little bit of a curve to them. So when they were still wet, I kind of just made them not completely flat, and I let them dry. And now we're ready to put some pipe cleaners on it for the stems. So if you take a pipe cleaner, fold it in half, and then twist one end a little bit. We're going to take this over to the machine, and on the wrong side of the leaf, we'll turn it over. And I'm going to put the monopoly thread in my machine in the needle and the bobbin, and I'm going to do a zigzag right over this pipe cleaner. So you want to make sure it's twisted nice and tight so your needle doesn't hit that fine little wire. And we'll zigzag over that, and we'll come back and install it on our pumpkin. So here's a look at my leaf after I used the monopoly to zigzag the stem on. This is the top of the leaf, so you can hardly see it. On the back side, you can see it stitched down. Just a little tip, before you sew your zigzag, I like to get my bobbin thread and my needle thread in my hand and hold it nice and tight So when I start sewing and do a little back stitching here, I don't end up with a big knot on the front where it's going to show. So now we're going to put our leaf and our stem on our pumpkin. Our stem is actually some cinnamon sticks that I've placed inside the hole left from not stitching all the way to the top. The cinnamon sticks, I did find them on Amazon, a big package of them. I don't remember what they cost, but I did all of our samples with them, and I still have plenty left. I can make lots and lots of pumpkins with this. This is about how long they are. So they worked well with all sizes of our pumpkins. I put them in the hole so they're about the height of the stem that I want it to be. So now to attach the leaf to it, I'll take this leaf and just keep twisting it. This is the stem. Just keep twisting it. And when I get a small loop at the top, I'll take another pipe cleaner and put it through that loop and just twist that together just to hold it. And then I'll just keep twisting this one, kind of bring these two together. And then it's time to make this cute little curly cue. So then I'll just take a pen or a pencil and I'll just take the pipe cleaner. Now this is going to be the small pumpkin, so I'm going to use part of the stem as the curly cue because I don't want a really long stem for the leaf. So I'm just going to start a little bit further up and just twist it around my pen. And then pull it off. So twist it around my pen and I'll just pull it off. And then I will place the leaf, just kind of slide it in between the little cinnamon sticks. Twist it around till you're happy with how it looks. Maybe I want that curly cue over on this side. And there we have our little pumpkin with our leaves. And I can take another, I might take another pipe cleaner and make another couple of curly cues for the top of this. You can make 2 leaves, 3 leaves, whatever you like, but there she is. Isn't she cute?